This is a special board meeting for the, see, you should also have. It's very simple. This.
Hey, the time of 12 o'clock is upon us. So this is a special Board of Directors meeting for Valley Regional Transit on September 9th, 2024. So with that, we do have some people here in the room and also online. So we will begin with our calling of the roll. Elaine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will call the roll now. Please say here if you are here. Ryan Davidson. Tom Daly.
Here.
Rod Beck. Any alternates from Ada County? No? Okay. Alexis Pickering. Miranda Gold. Oh, there you are. Yes. Lance McGinnis Brown.
Here.
Sabrina Minshall.
Present.
Greg Rast. John Brunel or Zach Pipemeyer. Jeff Flynn or Nick Miller.
Jeff Flynn here.
Thank you, Jeff. Ashley Ford Squires.
Here.
Jordan Morales. Bree Brush. Thought Bree was going to be here.
I see her name up there.
Yeah, I think she is. Okay, and Mary McLean is out of the country. Jerem Wagner.
Here.
Chuck Stodick. Rob McDonald. Helen Russell. It looks like Nicole Baird Spencer is here. Yes?
Here,
For
yes.
Helen? Okay. John Evans.
Here.
Rob Fisher or Lee Belt. Joe Steer.
Here.
Todd Lavoie.
Here.
Dave Teedy.
Here.
Mayor Kling is not. Dale Reynolds. Dale, get back on this one. Mark Stewart.
Present.
Dave Hershey or Trevor Chadwick.
I do see Councilor Chuck Stodick, Councilor Stodick on
Okay,
the list up
see
there.
that
He's muted,
now.
so, but I
Thank
do
you.
see him on there.
And then Jason Brinkman.
Mark Wasdell for Jason Brinkman out of the county.
Okay. All right, we do have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so are there any additions or changes to the agenda? I do not believe so. It's a pretty simple agenda. So public comment, is there anyone in the room or anyone online that would like to provide public comment at this time?
Pajan is there.
So I know you had mentioned he was not going to, if I remember correct. So that moves us into, again, this is, like I said, just a special meeting, very simple agenda. So we'll move into section 4, public hearing. Staff will present the need for emergency changes to the FY25 services in Eagle. Following that explanation, the public hearing will take place. No decision will take place during this hearing.
The decision will be after the
Right
hearing
after
is
that.
closed.
So
Yeah.
the action item will be following that. So this would just be the presentation. And Stephen, are you doing that presentation? Okay.
I am. Thank you, members of the board, Chairman. And I'm Stephen Hunt, Chief Development Officer of Valley Regional Transit. I'm here to talk about the proposed discontinuation of the 160 Eagle on demand as part of our FY25 emergency service changes. This is an action item, and again, it's staff's recommendation that we discontinue Route 160 on demand due to loss of funding support from the City of Eagle. To go over timeline of how we got here, each year, VRT staff goes and presents to each of our funding partners as to what our funding requests are. In May, VRT sent the City of Eagle a request for FY25 budget, a budget request for FY25. In June, VRT went and presented to the City of Eagle on that request. Throughout the summer, City of Eagle held their budget workshops, and in August, the City Council approved a budget that did not include funding for the Route 160. Last week, we held a public hearing to discuss the proposed reduction then of the 160, and if we move forward with discontinuing the 160, it would end service September 30th. So starting October 1st, there would not be any more 160. Just to remind folks what the 160 is, it's an on-demand service that covers the City of Eagle with regional connections in Boise and Meridian. Boise, the connection is at Gary and Bunch, Meridian connections both at St. Luke's Meridian and at the Village on Eagle Road, both on Eagle Road. We began this as a pilot back in 2023 and started at fare free. Then in September, so the beginning of FY23, we began charging fares for the service. In April, we expanded the service to cover earlier and later times, allowing people to get to and from work on the 160. We had seen some growth over the time that we started the service to today, and however, the demand for the service, the ridership on the service, was still below what our hopes were. However, it was growing. The service was available to the general public as well as to seniors, and is accessible as are all of our services. So it was used by all residents of Eagle. Available to all residents of Eagle. On September 4th, we had a public hearing. There were 5 testimonies that were read in at that time, and the summaries of those testimonies I'll speak to here, but you all should have received their complete testimony earlier today. And the takeaway was that the riders, or the testimonies that were provided, acknowledged that there was quite a bit of service the service that was provided was useful and connected to places across the region. There were several testimonies of folks that used it within Eagle, but also to connect to the broader network. There were some comments about confusion of the apps and how that could be improved. And there continues to be some confusion between the on-demand style service and the beyond access services. And those are things that we had planned on and will continue to improve, including making those services even more seamless. There were some also comments about the fact that we need to be considering the transportation needs of individuals who are not senior and not disabled. So that is one of the holes of the Beyond Access service, is that you have to qualify for that service. And so that was the specific use case that the on-demand service was intended to fill. And there were comments about how the service, although it was below our use targets, was still fulfilling important trips, and the riders that used it appreciated those connections. And there were some comments about whether or not we could use advertising more efficiently, or not more efficiently, but if we could use more advertising, if that would be enough to keep the service moving forward. But I think the most common theme throughout the public comments was the discussion of having that public transportation was important to people maintaining their independence. There were a number of testimonies about how, as people were either aging out of driving or had a disability or through life changes needed to use public transit, and that they found that independence was really important to them, not having to rely on family, friends, or others to make their travel options. available to them, allowed them to continue living the life that they wanted to. Those were that was the flavor of the testimonies. Again, I trust that you all received the full text of those testimonies earlier today. And I guess I would just also mention that one of the takeaways that we had in the public hearing was a desire to continue working with the City of Eagle on finding some solutions for how to make Beyond Access more available to the general public. And that obviously will need additional funding, but we did this as a pilot initially, and we're committed to trying to serve the residents of Eagle, but also all of Ada and Canyon County in the most efficient way that we can. Our goal is to simplify transportation options through consolidation and coordination across the different providers, and that's how we ended up with the Beyond Access service. That's our vision for how on-demand and the other transportation offerings that are out there can work together going forward. However, without any local funding for the Route 160, we don't have any other pots that we can pull from. And so it remains staff's recommendation that we discontinue that service starting October 1st. That's the action, and I would stand for any questions.
Again, thank you. Thank you so much. So just reference for everyone online and here, the email reference in regards to the comments that were sent out, that was sent this morning at 9:30, just after 9:30. So you should have those in your email in case you're wondering where those are at. Okay, so with that, any questions for Stephen?
I have a question.
Yes.
Mark Stoyer, City of Nampa. How many vehicles were part of Route 160 by the service?
Mr. Chairman, we had dedicated, I believe, one bus throughout the whole day for the 160. It was part of a larger pool that provided service in Eagle. But there was one dedicated vehicle each day, if I'm not mistaken. Leslie or Elaine might be able to provide a correction on that.
Stephen, this is Leslie. That's correct. We had one vehicle that was available during the hours of service.
At what cost to the City of Eagle would they have had to approve in order to maintain that service?
Mr. Chairman, the funding request was $98,000 for FY25.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Sure, Daly.
Yes, mine is how does this compare to other, do we have any comparison in terms of what the cost is and the usage, et cetera, and the advertisement? How did we make that known availability in the City of Eagle?
The closest comparison we have to the 160 is the 150. So that's the service in Nampa. They were run very similarly. And we did not see the same kind of use in the City of Eagle that we see in Nampa and Caldwell with the 150. There could be a number of reasons for that. One, it hasn't been around for as long. When we initiated the 150 in Nampa and Caldwell, that was to replace existing fixed route service that had been there for decades. When we started the 160 in Eagle, it was new service. They had sparse fixed route service the previous year during the pandemic. And so I think availability, but awareness was an issue that we struggled with the 160. We did do several campaigns to try and increase that awareness. And we did see growth on it. So this is one thing that we've tried to make sure that our funding partners are aware of, that when we start new service, there is kind of a maturation time. Sure, we would prefer to see that continue to see and believe that we would have been able to see continued growth in ridership on the 160 had we been able to continue it.
Well,
Yes, please.
and then the City of Eagle, obviously they're not here to comment, but how did we interact with them in terms of making the discussion here to them in terms of the value or potential value of the $98,000 that they didn't provide?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, and Nicole is on the line. She can speak, I think, for the city of Eagle, but we've had a long relationship with the city of Eagle on trying to right-size transit service in that community. And I think the big takeaway, why we're having a special meeting here in September, is because we kind of fell out of our typical process a little bit. And what so if I can, just as a way of education, when we start our processes of reaching out to the public, even now for what we're going to be doing in 2026, it's important for us to get a clearer view from each of those funding jurisdictions as to what the priorities are. And then we have time to build out what those scenarios are. We unfortunately didn't have any opportunity, given the time frame between when the budget decision in October was to remove the 160 until now, to come up with any kind of alternative solution there. Those usually take a couple months to sort out. It's hard to do that within a budget cycle. As you all know, when you're working on your individual budgets, that can happen within weeks, and we typically try and get public input on these concepts. And so if there are interests in if there are concerns about how VRT serves a community, we try and get ahead of that even 1 or 2 years to provide the lead time so that there isn't a disruption of service, so that we could transition from one thing to the next. That wasn't possible in this case, however.
If I could add to that, I think, probably the biggest takeaway for me is ongoing communication is extremely important as we move through our budget process. I made a presentation to the City Council in Eagle early in the budget process about our experience, what we expected next year. I didn't hear anything at that particular meeting that there were concerns that arose later as they really dug into their budget and began to understand the challenges they were facing in terms of budgeting for everything that they had the previous year without raising taxes. And ultimately they chose not to raise any, not to take an increase. And in doing that, it created a budget that didn't have room for everything. At that point, they had to make a decision what things to cut. So certainly I understand that budget process. Many of you do as well. Unfortunately, what didn't happen was communication back and forth between our organization and the city as that was ongoing, so that we could help them understand the ramifications and the pluses and minuses. So as I said, if I've learned anything, it's that we need to continually communicate with all of our partners, and we'll work to do that better, and would ask all of you to work to do that better. I think a couple of other things that I'd like to note. In Canyon County, we're able to use federal funding for operations at a much higher level than we can in Ada County. And so operations in Canyon County per unit end up being less expensive on the local level than than they do in Ada County. I think that's also part of what hurt this service. We're looking to see if there's ways that we can overcome that. Hopefully, going forward, we can do that. But I think, again, then that points out that the lack of dedicated funding doesn't allow our organization to really plan for the future in any certain way, because everything is so unpredictable in terms of what will or will not get budgeted in a following year. So lessons learned, this was originally a pilot. I was going to say the other difference between this and our on-demand service in Nampa, besides the fact that it had a built-in ridership, if you will, because the fixed route services had been there so long, is that we began this with very limited hours, 5 to 5, and it wasn't going to serve any work trips. And so our original outreach was not to those folks who would use it for work trips. We later expanded the hours to include those work trips, but by then we didn't really have enough time to do the kind of outreach we would normally do to that other expanded audience to try and grow ridership. As Stephen noted, we still were growing ridership. I think ultimately it would have grown, but ultimately this might not, maybe the other lesson is that we'll just have to work harder to be more innovative, to figure out a way over the hump of the expense of the local expense in Ada County versus Canyon County in providing these kinds of services.
Thank you so much. Another question?
No, just as a follow-up, thank you, Elaine, for that comment, because that was one of my follow-up questions, the difference between Nampa Caldwell versus Eagle, and you explained part of that. So as we all know, we all face budgets and we all have to make decisions. And that was my main question is, was the city of Eagle, as they made their budget questions, how much information did they really have? But clearly they made a decision and we're all living with it. Thank you.
So will this be pretty much a wash? Are there fixed costs that were associated with it that'll have to be absorbed, or is it going to be pretty much just a clean wash of if this is approved by the board? Does that make sense? That question?
You're asking if there are additional expenses that we need to cover if we cancel the one, even if we cancel the 160?
So if the board votes to cancel it, is there fixed costs that have to be absorbed by VRT or by the other cities, or?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if we cancel the 160, then that fixes our budget hole of Eagle not providing the funding for the 160. So we should be whole.
Mr. Chairman, this is Nicole with the City of Eagle.
Yes, go ahead, Nicole.
I just want to put some clarifying facts out here for the board. I just want to be clear. The $98,000 was providing 1,200 trips a year, which was over $75 a trip for the City of Eagle to provide this service within our jurisdiction. And the testimony we received, while we did hear that there were several users who did actually qualify for Beyond Access or did use it for a service, we did also hear that it was recreationally being used. And not that that's bad, but for that amount of money per service, the city council felt it was not an appropriate expenditure of the city at this time. The city has made efforts in the last 5 years since the discontinuation of the 9 extension, when we lost funding because Middleton and Starr stopped funding that project, to try and find an option to provide services within the City of Eagle. This just isn't the most cost-effective way for us to do that. And we did say that we would be interested in working with VRT if we could do a combination of the Beyond Access program and something that would allow for other users on that system. That would be great. But at this point in time, I just want to be clear. Financially, the cost to the city per ride was not beneficial to moving forward with the service.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate that information, that clarity on that.
Thank you, Nicole, because that was my real question. Making sure that the City of Eagle, when they made that in a conscious way, and so thank you for that.
Good. Any other questions? Yes, Mark?
Yeah, just one more question, Stephen. So now that you're going to have an additional vehicle available, are you going to sell that vehicle, or will you use it to enhance maybe another on-demand?
I would refer that to Leslie.
Yeah, so the vehicle that's used is already in service with the Beyond Access service that we use. So it'll just go back into that pool full-time instead of part-time.
Thank you.
Any questions from anyone online? Okay, very good. Then we will open the public hearing at this time. Is there anyone that would like to provide any testimony or information for that public hearing? Nobody in the room, anybody online? Okay, with that, then we will move forward. After providing that opportunity for public hearing, there was no public hearing provided. That will move us into action item number 5A. This is for, again, the Valley Regional Transit Board of Directors to provide the opportunity to discuss the discontinuation of Route 160 VRT on demand in Eagle due to the City of Eagle removing funding for the 160 in their FY 2025 budget. We appreciate Nicole providing that information in regards to the reasoning behind the City of Eagle looking at that from their budgetary standpoint and being as prudent as possible with the tax dollars they have there in Eagle. So with that, is there anything additional, Stephen, you'd like to add as we move into this, or any questions or discussions from the board or any motions?
Mr. Chair.
Please, yes, is that, who was that?
Sabrina.
Yes, go ahead, Sabrina.
Just, it sounds like without any additional questions, if you're ready for a motion, I can make that.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so I would move that Valley Regional Transit discontinue Route 180 on demand due to loss of funding support from the City of Eagle.
This
Thank you
is
so
Nicole.
much.
I second that.
Yes, we have a motion from Sabrina and a second from Nicole. Again, that is to discontinue the service of Route 160. Is there any discussion on that motion? With that, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Then that motion passes. And that, I do not believe we have an executive session. So with that, that is the only thing on the agenda. So we appreciate everyone taking the time to join us for that. And again, thank you, Nicole, for that additional information, for being here to provide that. We do appreciate that. And without anything else coming before, then we stand adjourned at this time. Thank you again for attending.